All righty, well, hey, so this is Connections 2016. I'm actually very, very happy and thankful that you all made the trip here. We have many folks who have traveled all over the world. I think we have almost a dozen customers here from the UK across the pond. Can you raise your hand if you are traveling? Great. Thanks for making the trip here. I also do want to thank our partners and sponsors. We've got Vantage Point, DSG, PitchMaps, Demandbase, CVI, and then the user group. Can we just show of hands? Great, thanks our sponsors, partners. Awesome, thanks for coming. Okay, well, great. In my presentation, I really thought, what I could really say that was probably going to maybe add some value to the conversation. And it took me back to about a year ago when I first was standing here about a year ago. And it was a pretty important moment kind of in my tenure here because it was really my first major event. I had just started at SAVO and I wasn't really sure what to say. And I wasn't also really sure what to really kind of talk about, right? And many of you folks were new faces, so I hadn't really had the chance to really get to know you. And so obviously a lot has happened in the last year, a lot of positive things. And so what I'd like to do in my presentation is talk about first what has happened last year and talk about some of the highlights. I'd like to also then move into maybe a section around the market where I'd like to share some provocative thoughts around the market. And then most importantly, I'd like to share with you our new product vision, which I'm super excited about, and we are absolutely convinced it's going to be groundbreaking. So kind of jumping in about the first year, before I kind of talk about SAVO, I'd like to make this a little bit more participatory here. And so I thought maybe get some of you talking. So does anyone here have something cool that's happened in the last year that you could share with us? Has anyone had anything really cool, been places? Anyone? Come on, don't be shy. All right, what do we have?
I got engaged last week.
All right, congratulations. Great. Okay, so that's great, thank you. Obviously, we've had some weddings here. I know at least SAVO, we've had some weddings. Anyone been married in the last year? Come on. All right. Handful of folks there. All right. Any new kids? I know Cam folks, all right. New kids? There you go. All right, anything else? All right. Anyone had a son that had 30 million hits on Google? John, okay, yep, pretty cool. Okay. Well, I guess for me in the last year, I guess personally to share with you, I had a couple of pretty cool events. I would say one is momentous. I don't know how cool it is. My first one is my 16-year-old boy is now driving. So be very afraid if you're on the road. He's driving now. But the other thing that happened for me that was actually pretty cool was my wife and I had a chance to kind of get away from the kids, and we took a big trip to Europe, and we decided to go to Pamplona, Spain. Folks know what happens there? Yep, so we did it. We donned the white garb and we ran with the bulls. So I got my wife to do that. So I will admit it was a little bit terrifying, a little bit risky. Until you're done, you don't really know if you're going to survive, but luckily we were not gored. And we ran into the amphitheater, with actually 3 or 4 bulls right on us into the tunnel and then into the crowd of thousands of people who were all wearing, as you saw, white and red, and they were cheering, and it was just a majestic sight. So as you might imagine, it was kind of a highlight for last year, and certainly a highlight of my life. But that was a cool thing I did last year. Turning the conversation to SAVO, we've had an equally pretty exciting year this last year. We've done some great things. I'd like to share with you some of those things. Maybe to start out just on the corporate side, SAVO right now is in our strongest position ever as a company. From a revenue standpoint, as many of you know, a year ago, the company was a little bit defocused, and so we've centered the core business on our content business, and that business is now growing nicely. From an expense standpoint, one of the things that we had to do as a company was to move from our adolescent phase to an adult phase, which really means that we need to be self-sufficient. And so one of the things that we really did was we really started focusing on our cost structure, really get our cost structure in line, such that we are right now on the cusp of profitability. And I know we have some of our investors here. I know I saw Mike from Goldman. We have Sterling, Sapphire, phenomenal investors, very supportive. But we felt as a company, we really needed to be self-sufficient and profitable as a company. And that was a goal for us over this last year. The other thing was obviously to really provide more value to our customers. And I'll talk about that in a bit. But it's really started translating into our financial results. Our renewals are really skyrocketing upwards. We've had our renewal rates now above the industry norms. And last quarter, we had a renewal rate of around 94%, which is fantastic from an industry standpoint. And last but not least, we are now as a company in a position where we can now start being a net buyer of companies. So over the next several years, you'll see us buying more companies and looking to really expand ourselves both organically and non-organically. So I'd say it's been a tremendous year. From a corporate standpoint, all the financial and metrics are pointing up. And I think it's obviously a credit to you as our customers, but also our employees that have been able to really help us position ourselves in this place. And we are now at a point where we are the undisputed market leader in a really fast-growing market, and we're only gaining ground at this point. So if you look at, the other thing from a perspective is obviously you as our customer, you're probably wondering, well, great, that's great for us, but what does that mean for you guys, right? And so one of the things that I tried to do over the last year was try to meet as many of you individually. Hopefully you'll see I'm very approachable. And please approach me if you see me. I enjoy just learning from each and every one of you. But the one thing I did was go out and try to meet as many people as possible. So I got on the plane and was constantly flying around the world and the country to meet with you individually. I know I've met many of you. I've met, I think, almost 100 plus of our customers, majority of them in person, many of them on the phone as well. And which really translates into hundreds and thousands of you as individuals. And the big thing that I learned was we needed to do a better job at SAVO at listening. That a lot of your ideas we were not properly implementing. And so what we needed to do was to listen better. And so we started instituting a number of things to really put you further in the center of our company. One of which was we created the SWAG, which was really our user alliance group. It's headed by Tom Forrester. And that group has taken off. It started a year ago in this same venue, and it was roughly 40 individuals or customers took place. The user group now has grown to 85 customers are participating, and I heard the number was 185 individuals are now participating in this individual user group. That's tremendous. So now I think we have about a half a dozen regional user groups now. And really, I think you may ask, like, what's the benefit of being the user group? Well, we really put you on the front lines with us. We really say, what are your opinions on our new product strategy? What are your opinions on what we want to do with some of our support models? We even ask questions around changes in the corporate model as well. So we really put you right next to us in the driver's seat and helping us guide our business. And this has been a really big change over the last year around how we go about the marketplace. The other thing we've done is, and I'll talk about it, we've obviously moved to Agile. And I'll be talking a little bit about that in the next slide. But what Agile does and the way it involves our customers, we no longer wait till the end of the product release to involve you in the product functionality and direction. As part of Agile, we now deploy weekly into the production environment. And we can actually give you an opportunity to guide us through that process. And there's a number of folks here from a customer standpoint that have been involved with helping us really roll out our new product release, which we're announcing today. So that's been certainly a big change, is instead of it happening on a one-off basis right at the end of the release, it's now happening on a weekly basis. And the last thing we've done from a customer standpoint, or not the last, but one other thing we've done from the customer standpoint is really beef up our customer success group. The customer success group is critical. And what we've learned at SAVO is that when we sell you our software, that's when the journey starts. And that's when we really need to start demonstrating value, because that's how you be successful, is when we help you become successful the day after the software is purchased. It has to be implemented, and then it has to be ongoingly managed. And that's beyond just the software. That's the best practices that we provide, the expertise that we provide through our customer success organization and our services group. And so what we've done is we have now more than doubled our customer success organization now. And that's where you have individual practitioners like Dave, Chris, Jen Roderick, I think Michael Siegel runs the group. These individuals have 15, 20 years of experience within sales enablement, and they bring real-world practical advice, but they also bring methodologies, best practices, health checks. And I encourage you to realize that sales enablement is not just a destination, it's a journey, it's a way of living. It's about constant operational hygiene and best practices, and it's a never-ending commitment. And so working with our customer success people to continue to institutionalize these best practices will lead to a better outcome. So that's on the customer side. Obviously, one of the things that you're probably interested in is in our product, right? And so when I joined here about a year ago, obviously I heard comments around product stability, reliability, functionality, and we listened, we took notes, and we made changes. So if you look at right now from an investment standpoint, we have obviously spent time kind of getting our cost structure in line, but we have taken the money and put a lot of it towards R&D and investment. So right now, about 32 to 33% of our net expenditures is in R&D. The industry average is 20%. So we now have more than 50% more than our average competitor in how much we spend on R&D. And this quarter, it's probably going to go up a couple of percentage points even higher to maybe 37, 36%. So we're almost double the industry average on how much we're spending in R&D. And that's obviously something that we're committed to really further our product differentiation and also the reliability of our product. The other major commitment we made from a development standpoint was we committed to Agile. Are people familiar with Agile? Yes? No? I can tell you it's revolutionary, and I'll tell you it's not just about Agile being applied in a product development use case. I'll be giving a keynote speech at CEB, a little bit of plug, in a couple weeks talking about how Agile should be applied, and the theories of Agile should be applied to selling and sales enablement. So stay tuned on that. If you're interested in the ebook, you'll be seeing it. But Agile is now a fundamental philosophy. People talk about lean prototyping. It's very similar to what the Agile philosophy. It doesn't just apply to a product development standpoint. It absolutely should apply to a selling and a sales enablement context. But in a development context, the way it applied to us was we were a waterfall company a year ago. We were doing releases once every 6 months, right? And one of the challenges of that was we weren't able to get functionality into the marketplace fast enough. So if you look at us now, a year later, we are now deploying into production once a week. That doesn't mean that we green light everything and we turn it on for you guys to see. In some cases we do, but at least we are now deploying production-ready code once a week. And you see how fast that moves is hopefully you have noticed that we've made some major improvements the last 60 days on the search. Have people noticed that our search is getting better? Hopefully you have. Well, I can tell you that a year ago, we would have waited 6 months to have deployed that functionality in the new release. We would have announced it today. We would have then released it in November. We made 3 micro releases around our search just within the last 60 days to improve search. So we're spinning faster our functionality and our new features, but also these releases. Now, the other piece of that is not just around speed, it's also around reliability. When you take all of these new functionality you build and you group them together into one monolithic release, you increase the level and the risk of error because you've got all of it happening at once. Versus if you do it on an iterative basis, you can make course corrections much faster and much easier when you get to the end as destination. So all of that is played out in our Agile approach, and it really is a credit to Doug and his leadership under our development team, and then all the developers here who have been part of this experience, and ops people as well. So that's been a major commitment from the company from a technology and development perspective. Okay? We've also obviously invested in making our products more reliable and enterprise scale. When I stood here a year ago, we were about 600,000 users. By the end of this year, we should be close to 800,000 users. I hope a year from now, we'll be breaking the million mark in number of users. That's 140 million transactions a year. That's what our software is now doing. So as you might imagine, reliability and scalability is critical to us. No one in the industry is even close. and how much reliability and scalability we're dealing with, the number of transactions. And what that also translates is in our ability and our willingness and our need to really service this across the world now. So we now have more and more customers that are global. We now have rolled out 23 languages. So as you might imagine, this issue of reliability, scalability is critical. And obviously it allows you all to sleep at night, right? Because if the system goes down or if there's some type of rendering problem, you'll be the first people to hear about it. So, I think just to put a stamp on where we are from a company standpoint, we're in a great position. We're in the strongest position ever. We're once again the market leader, 2 to 3 times larger than our nearest competitor in the sales enablement market. And the sales enablement market as a whole, according to Forrester, is growing around 40% a year. So this is obviously a great position to be in as a company and as a marketplace. So let me kind of turn the page to really around the market. And what I'd like to do is maybe be a little bit provocative, and I'd really encourage you to keep an open mind, because some of the things I'm going to say to you may not quite sit well with you. And instead of getting mad at me, just pull me aside and let's have a debate about it, because I have some thoughts. I've thought about this for a while, and I encourage you to really think about it, and then let's have a discussion around it. So the first kind of provocative thought I'd really have you think about is everyone obviously is familiar with the whole sales funnel concept, obviously, right? And what's interesting about it is if you think about it, if you strip away the CRM expenditures and you just look at the other IT expenditures in the funnel, what percent do you think really apply to the top of the funnel versus the bottom of the funnel? Meaning that if you look at the ratio of expenditures between top of the funnel to bottom of the funnel, what do you think it is in your organization? Do you think it's 50-50? I think it's 60, 70% towards the top. What do you think? All right, well, I'll kind of jump to it. So we've done some initial data gathering, and right now it's about 80 to 90% of expenditures are at the top of the funnel. That's marketing automation tools, it's digital asset management tools, it's lead scoring tools, right? And if you think about it, is that really the best way to spend your money? At the very least, it should be 50-50. I mean, let's all be fair and balanced, right? But I can make a strong argument, I will make a strong argument, that your money is much better spent at the bottom of the funnel. And hear me out. The first thing I would say is, if you think about the top of the funnel, right, and you think about if you want to increase 5%, which is ultimately at the end of this, you want to increase your sales 5%. If you want to increase the top of the funnel, right, that's a big amount of money you have to spend. Imagine trying to increase your marketing budget or your campaigns, your advertising 5%. That's a big number. If you equate that to trying to increase the bottom of the funnel, such as increasing your closure rates 5%, it's a lot less expensive, and it's a lot bigger impact, and it's a lot easier. And obviously, most of you know that. Obviously, you're in sales enablement. Obviously, that's your job, right? Your job is to help increase productivity and efficiency at the bottom of the funnel. So then why is the IT spend all going to the top of the funnel? Well, those are for some discussions we can have over some drinks, but I'm sure it has a lot to do, well, let's not go there. So I think you hear my point, which is the money could be much, much better spent at the bottom of the funnel, right? And I think the industry is starting to recognize that. So if you, whoops, go backwards. If you look at this slide, I probably spent the first 3 months of my tenure here trying to create a taxonomy. I was like, there's been so much noise out there in the marketplace, so let's create a taxonomy of all the vendors out there in the various categories. And so this is the best one I've come up with, and we actually didn't create it. It was created by a group called VentureBeat. And so this is the sales productivity market, which is all of the tools that are being addressed to the bottom of the funnel, right? So let me ask you this. Okay, how many folks here are getting at least 5 calls a day from vendors in this space? Come on, raise your hand high. All right, 10 a day? 10? Let's have a winner here. 10? Does anyone have 15? Okay, we have 15, that's the winner. Well, I think you all, obviously kind of understand, like, this is obviously a very noisy field. Everyone is saying that they've got the new cure for cancer and that their tool is going to increase productivity, right? And what I tell you is, the best thing I would argue is we're going to say that SAVO, which is the orange bucket, SAVO is the largest player in the productivity enablement space. We're obviously going to say that that is the most important place where you should start, which is productivity enablement. But I can also back that up. So if you look at where the smart money invests, so look at venture financing over the last 4 years, there's been about 3 to 4 billion in venture financing in this space, of which 40% of it has been in the orange bucket, which is productivity enablement. And the two biggest categories that has been invested in is content enablement and content share. So what we're talking about this next day and a half is a lot about sales enablement, productivity, and content share. And if you follow the smart money, which is the venture money, assuming they're smart, they're all believing the same thing, that that is really where the kind of the epicenter is for productivity and enablement. So let me kind of maybe share another kind of provocative thought, which is, if you think about this, these areas, people management, pipeline analytics, sales intelligence, productivity engagement, I would argue that the subcategories at the bottom are the ones that are really driven more by sales management and sales ops. And the categories like productivity enablement and engagement, those are really driven by the seller. And it's probably hard for many people to probably believe, but a sales rep probably doesn't get excited about pipeline analytics software or account planning software, right? But they do get excited about a lot of the things that we do in sales enablement, and they get excited about the items that are in the engagement category. And so when you think about projects and expenditures on a given year, I'd encourage you to keep that in mind, is you can't go too far in one way than the other. You've got to balance it out. And while you're trying to make your sales managers happy, you should also recognize you've got to keep your sellers happy as well. So you've got to balance your investments and balance your expenditures. The other thing I would kind of really get you to think about is, what's the elephant in the living room? Where does the CRM fit in this whole equation, right? Well, I guess what I would say is that if you look at kind of a lot of the research, I think the best way to think of the CRM is a system of record. It's a critical part of the sales automation process, but what it is a system of record. So think of it like an accounting software. You have to have your accounting software. But then you have all of these workflow applications that you bolt onto your accounting software, right? You have expense reimbursement software like Concur. You have tax application software like Lear. You have time and billing software, right? You attach to your system of record, which is your accounting. And that's the way I think you should think about your CRM, is it's not going to solve world hunger. It does have a critical role as your system of record. But all of these subcategories, those are all workflow applications. Those are best-of-breed workflow applications that get bolted onto your CRM. Now think about this. Many of you are going to say, well, eventually the CRM is going to do all that. Or at least you have maybe your IT organization who's going to do that. Because obviously you're spending a lot of money in your CRM, and there's kind of this utopian belief that the CRM is going to do everything. Well, if you really think about it, I would argue that in time, some of that stuff is going to be absorbed in the CRM, and it's mostly going to be the stuff in purple, because those type of applications are nearest to the CRM, but they're also the ones that are text and data heavy, right? So pipeline analytics, sales intelligence, obviously with the recent announcement of Einstein at Dreamforce, those are all the categories in purple. The stuff in blue, though, those are applications that require a very visual, very media-rich way in which you interact with them. Those are not applications that lend themselves to a real estate that really is about 1.5 inch on your CRM application. We've done an enormous amount of data gathering just about you as users. We obviously have an application that surfaces content in a web portal or a web app. We also have an application that surfaces it in mobile. and we have an application that surfaces the software in a CRM, Salesforce, Dynamics, etc. So we have looked at 140 million transactions, and I'm curious to get a sense is, what % of those transactions do you think people have, your sellers have accessed that content in the CRM? What's that? 1%. Anyone other guessers? It's a little bit higher than that. It's about 5%, but it's pretty close. So there's this, I think, this belief that everyone's just going to go to the CRM and all the content's going to be there, and your seller's never going to leave the CRM and access content there. And I'm telling you, based on 140 million transactions, that's not going to happen, right? There will be content that is going to surface in your CRM, but that content is going to be very specialized for various use cases and various forms of content, right? Now, it doesn't mean you don't use the CRM as your centerpiece, but what we do with a lot of our customers is we have a tab, and you click on the tab, and then the web app pulls up, and then you can actually see the application itself. And that's how our new offering that we're going to be releasing does it as well. So some of the content that is going to surface on a 1-inch piece of real estate, that will appear within the CRM, within the application. But if you want to actually access the web app, you can do that through the CRM, through the tab. But I'm trying to help you understand. I'm trying to get you to think about the content. Don't really go for the simplistic argument, right? If you really think about it, you want a visual-rich experience in engaging your content. There's reasons why you don't watch movies too often or TV shows on your cell phone, right? You obviously need a rich, vibrant way in which you want to interact with the movies and with content, okay? So I just want to repeat, we do think that the CRM has an important role, and we will continue to invest in our COP product, but we also understand that it really is about 5 to 10% of the time that people will access content via the CRM. They will increasingly access the content through mobile. That's going to increasingly grow. And the portal and the web app still has a very important place in the universe of content consumption. Okay? So I know I've said some things that probably will elicit some conversation. I look forward to having those conversations with you individually, and we can talk more about it. So let me really go to, well, I guess I have one more slide here, and that's just giving you a sense of directionally where we're going. So SAVO right now is the largest competitor, a large player in the productivity enablement. We cover 4 of the 6 categories. Over time, we're going to continue to consolidate that category and provide all the functionality within the productivity enablement space. And over time, in multiple years out, we're going to start looking at adding functionality in the engagement space as well. So that's more of a mid to long-term plan around the engagement side. On the near-term side, we've got to continue to dominate the productivity enablement space. So let me switch gears from the market to the product. Before I talk about the future, I want to talk about the now, which is right now the marketplace is in Sales Enablement 1.0. That area we continue to invest in. So about half of our R&D dollars continues to invest in Sales Enablement 1.0. So our Smarter Content series, our Smarter Engagement series, which is presentation, proposals, postcards, we continue to invest about half of our R&D dollars in that area. And what you've seen is we've come out with some important functionality that we continue to build on. We've obviously rolled out embedded videos, search enhancements, video load times, 23 languages. We now support all 3 mobile platforms. We've gotten our security certifications. And then we also have listened to you about admin ease. We're getting better at that. There's still a lot of room for improvement. But we've now come up with these design templates in this new release, analytics packs. We've continued to improve our analytics. We understand this is a sore issue. We're going to be making, hopefully, an even bigger investment in analytics in the first half of next year, because that, I know, is a big area of feedback from you guys around analytics. But we've made a pretty decent step in this upcoming release. And we also have, as Jack Aero said, talked about open borders or open content. So we've created, as part of this new release, a SharePoint connector, a sales content connector, and also we've now connected, we'll be rolling out an Adobe Experience Manager or a digital asset management connector to connect into your digital asset management system. Because a lot of the folks in marketing, many of you are here, understand that to really have a full visibility on a piece of content between what is happening in your content creation tool and ultimately what a seller hands out, it's all with this system, right? So those type of pieces of functionality we're releasing in this immediate release that we're announcing today. But that doesn't stop there. We will continue to invest in Sales Enablement 1.0. So we are making a major commitment with a refresh and a pretty substantial investment in our presentation proposal products that will come out at the end of this year, and also a substantial investment in our COP product. Some really cool things we're going to do around COP and Salesforce integration by the end of this year as well. So full object integration with Salesforce, related lists, I think that's been a big thing. Within the engagement series is pulling data from presentations. So I know a big use cases around QBR decks or pitch book decks. We currently do that from a services standpoint. Now we're going to be rolling out functionality by the end of the year around that. And then email content. This is obviously a part where the market's going, is around email distribution and content. So that's certainly a key piece that we want to go. Now I do want to switch and really talk about Sales Enablement 2.0 and where the market's going. And this is really exciting to talk about the future and where the future is heading. So I think when you think about where the future is heading is that digital content consumption is already habitualized. That's a powerful word to say. But what is happening is that now the average person, and this is over billions of people, now spends an average of 50 minutes a day interacting with content over the internet in a personalized way in your consumer lives, right? And so that muscle memory is being built every day. This is how I interact with content, is how I interact with content in these consumer sites, right? Well, the challenge I think you have, or we have, is that there's a disconnect between what they experience in the consumer world and your personal world and what you see in the commercial world. So think about this. When John Aiello was standing here, whoever, 10, 11 years ago, right? The enterprise experience that people saw was better than the consumer experience they were getting at home with content. So 10 plus years ago, the way you would get content when you were a consumer was you would go to your local Blockbuster, rent out a movie, or you would go to Borders or Barnes & Noble and you'd read a book, right? But then you'd go to work, and that's when you'd see a portal, you'd see a content management solution. Back then it was either Vignette, if you remember these names, I think Plumtree was one, or SharePoint. And you would see a better experience at work than you would in your consumer world and how content was being accessed. Well, that has now flipped, because now what you see is a much better experience in the consumer world and how you're interacting with content. And then you go to the enterprise world and the content experience is not as good. Now, the portal that we obviously, that will continue to be an important part of the sales enablement strategy, but the experience with the portal has got to change. And as I said, the CRM is still a critical piece, and there is a place for content to be serviced within the CRM, but the experience has got to be a much better and more personalized and visually more exciting experience. Because ultimately, there's a disconnect, because the consumer experience now is so much better than the enterprise experience. And so you have your sellers that are bringing this to your attention, I'm sure, right? So SAVO is going to close that gap for you. Let me help you understand how we're going to do it. If you don't do it, I guess maybe to start there, if you don't do it, then you run the risk of these type of companies. Kodak in the video camera industry, Nokia in the cell phone industry, and Borders in the bookstore industry. These type of habitualized behaviors have already been ingrained, and I think you have to think about how you respond to it. And the way that SAVO is introducing things is that we did an extreme amount of research about how people consume content. We looked at, as I said, 140 million transactions internally. We also looked at the consumer world, and what we found out is that the top 15 websites, 10 of them are content consumption websites. half of those websites all act and look the same way. They are a feed-based approach. So feeds come in, that's how LinkedIn, that's how Facebook, that's how Twitter, all of those sites act the exact same way. The user experience is the same. The way you do things is exactly the same. The other half of the websites were channel content sites. They were like YouTube, Tumblr, Amazon, TED Talks, Hulu. All of these sites, they all act and look the same way. They've got a banner at the top and they've got content carousels on the bottom, and they all have the exact same user experience. So there's not a lot of mystery here, right? You either have a feed-based approach, or you have a content channel-based approach, or you have an archaic kind of enterprise experience, right? And I'm telling you that 50 minutes a day people are spending on these sites, billions of people, and they're getting used to engaging with content this way, and there's a disconnect when they come to the corporate world, right? So enterprise solutions lag consumer trends. They want the consumer content experience to be in this manner. You need enterprise-grade security and scalability, but you need a consumerized experience. So what we are maintaining is the world is shifting to Sales Enablement 2.0. And that experience has three major tenets to this approach. The first one is it's got to be personalized. It's got to be a consumer-based approach. And SAVO, with our new offering, will be the only provider in the space that is really built around a personalized consumer experience. Now, people will say, yeah, I've got this cool new user interface, but we have built from the ground up and looked at the usability of our software and said, how can it be more consumer-like? And so it's a philosophy, not a feature. Being personalized or a consumer is not a feature, it's a philosophy, and that's how we built our software. Predictive, this is based on machine-based learning. I know a lot of people you hear talk about predictive analytics with Einstein and stuff. At least our belief is that you really need a scoring algorithm that we have obviously been working on to be really considered machine-based learning. And so with our new offering that's being announced today, it'll be predictive analytics machine-based learning that will augment or supplement the tagging and the search process. We'll still have search, we'll still have tagging, but we'll have the ability for you to leverage our scoring algorithm to really drive these type of predictive results and recommendations. And the last is connected. The connected really is to connect into initially what we'll be showing is a calendaring function with Outlook, but next in a couple months will be the CRM, and then eventually soon it'll be things like LinkedIn. And all of that will give you a very intelligent delivery mechanism for these recommended content. That's all machine-based. So pioneers go beyond, and you can too. So what we're announcing is that in 2017, Sales Enablement will take on a whole new form. We're releasing our Aero platform. We realize that this is a big step, and we understand that you may not get there immediately, and so we will continue to invest half of our dev dollars in Sales Enablement 1.0, and then half will be towards this new thing. And our goal is to really help you bridge this. It's not going to be a light switch, it's going to be a dial. But over time, and I'm not saying decades, over the next several years, this is directionally where we think the market is going. So I guess we want to show a quick video, is that right? Great. So this is our new software. This is the front end. Yeah, obviously, it's sexy, it's cool, but what I think you'll find is that it's very intuitive. I strongly encourage you to go to our Genius bars and start interacting with the software and playing with it. And what you'll find is that you don't even need a user manual because you've seen this before. You've seen this in how you use YouTube, how you use Hulu. You'll be able to navigate the software with ease. And that's because it's intuitive. You've built up the muscle memory because of how you've used your consumer sites. But this is the future of content, right? What we also are going to do, obviously, is connect it with a calendaring function, right? We've talked about this, that it becomes a whole concept of a digital sales concierge, right? So you have a meeting with USA Bank the next day. You don't even have to look for the content. The content finds you. The content that you need for financial services, for a banking client, is already surfaced to you and ready for you as a seller. The next scenario is we start connecting it to LinkedIn and tying it to knowing that you're a CMO that you're meeting with and surfacing content that a CMO would want to see, and you not having to look for it as a seller. And then eventually to a point where we combine content assembly and content management, where reports or documents or presentations self-assembly, and they have it ready for a seller without them even having to look for it. That's where the world is going. And if you don't believe me, then I'd encourage you to look at your iPhone. Who's downloaded the new iOS, the 10, on their iPhone? Have you noticed that they're going into your calendar? Have you noticed that? So they knew this morning I was going to end up here, and they told me there was traffic, and that I was going to be 43 minutes late, right? This is already happening, right? This is the world of the future. And what Google and Apple is doing on the iPhone, this has got to happen on the content side, and SAVO is blazing the trail here. So what you're going to see is a revolution that's happening already on the consumer side, and people are going to expect it on the content, and we'll already be there and helping you. So as I wrap up, I guess what I'd get you to think about is that when John Aiello was here 10 plus years ago, he was presenting to you a scenario where Sales Enablement 1.0 was happening, which is really search and find, right? It was content portals that were there. The world shifted to Sales Enablement 1.0, which is where the world is now, which is the prescriptive delivery of content using a tagging process or search. There's content assembly. That's where the world is. And that's where our imitators, our smaller imitators, have tried to catch us. And they're doing some pretty cool things, but we're leapfrogging the market. We're bringing the world to Sales Enablement 2.0, and this is a revolutionary vision that we're confident is where the market's going, and it's around personalized, predictive, and connected. And we're going to bridge you there. We're not going to leave you if you need time to stay within 1.0, but we're going to bridge you to 2.0. And the final thoughts I will say, and then I'll wrap up, or I'm wrapping up, is that I started this whole conversation around my trip to Spain, right? And ultimately that trip was about risk-taking, right? And I'm sure each one of you individually are saying, wow, that's a big idea. Hopefully you are. This is not a small idea, but you're probably saying, what type of risk do I take in my organization? Are people ready for this, right? What is the risk of action? That's probably what you're thinking, right? What I'd encourage you to do is think about two things when you evaluate this. The first is that I'll be, as I said, giving a keynote presentation on agile selling and agile sales enablement. And what I'd tell you is, you may not have to go big all at once. Think about how you prototype this, you lean prototype this, you do something small in your organization to get familiar with this. Because our initial software, I think, is a showcase software, but the next release in Q1 is going to be even better. There's still some usability issues with our software with 1.0, but by 2.0, which is in May, or in the Q1 timeframe, it's going to be even better. And this gives you an opportunity to kind of get acclimated to the Aero release, and to really start trying it and getting comfortable with it. Because I'd encourage you, once you do that, you really become familiar with it, you'll see how powerful it is and how institutional and how easy it is and how intuitive it is. The second thing I think ask you to think about is, what is the cost of inaction, right? Everyone always thinks about what the cost of action is, but what is the cost of inaction, right? And I'd encourage you to think that there is really an empty feeling that your sellers have with their experiences now, because they are used to a much more intuitive, much easier, more personalized experience in the consumer world, and there's a gap. And the other challenge you have is what Mary Shea is going to talk about from Forrester, is there's a tsunami coming, which is the millennials. And those millennials demand and expect the software to behave in the way that I just described as the future. And that's not that far away. Millennials are right now occupy 35% of the workforce right now, and within 3.5 years, it's going to be 50% of the workforce is going to be millennials. And they are expecting the software to be working the way I just described. So I look forward to having a chance to chat with you individually. This is going to be an exciting day and a half. Thank you for your time. Thanks. Bye.